100 convictions must be obtained in serious corruption cases within 3 years. That clock started ticking about 1.5 years ago, and it ends ticking in April 2014, so we just have 2 years left. Now, why I say it's a big challenge is that important corruption or important people who have benefited from corruption is defined as people who have made more than 5 million rand from corruption and who still have more than 5 million rand to recover. In the previous 10 years in South Africa, I doubt that more than 5 of those cases have been done. So to make it 100 in 3 years, that's quite a challenge. The Anti-Corruption Task Team, we have initiated so far 56 investigations, or let us say we are talking about persons here rather than cases. So 56 persons who we think have made more than 5 million rand from corruption and still have the 5 million rand are under investigation at the moment. 26 of them are already in court at the moment, and 21 of them have had their assets frozen. Total value of those assets is a lot. It's over 500 million rand, and we suspect the R1 billion mark will be hit within the foreseeable future, as they say. But ACT is not only dealing with those high priority, the 5 million rand cases. It is in total dealing with 392 suspects, of which 183 have appeared in court and 9 have already been convicted. And I think from reading the newspapers and all that, you will see that this includes a number of prominent politicians, heads of departments and various state institutions. We are debating in these various groups about what we can do better on dealing with corruption. I think one of the issues is the better use of civil remedies. You all know that I think that criminal justice system, you have to have evidence beyond a reasonable doubt to take action, and that is quite a high benchmark to meet sometimes. But civil remedies can be very effective. So in asset forfeiture, we have done some very big cases where at least we were able to recover the money even though a conviction was not possible. But I think more importantly, there are issues like civil penalties. The Americans have a system where if in a civil court it can be shown that you as the contractor helped to corrupt the process, that you are liable for a penalty that is quadruple the total value of the contract that was awarded to you. And that is one of the issues that we are discussing. It was one of the issues that the Minister of Finance also alluded to in those measures he announced. But we believe that can be a significant deterrent. Even if you can't get a criminal conviction, but if you do have a 500 million rand contract and you have to pay 2 billion in penalties, we believe that can help to make people think a little bit more. And then I think part of what I've talked about is also a better central capacity to do investigations, to do disciplinary action, and to do perhaps the civil litigation as well. One of the major things that do need to be done is to build a more professional public service. We really need to move to a situation where the public service is more independent from the executive. I think they even moot the idea of a sort of super director general that is in charge of the public service. But essentially it would be an expanded role for our current Public Service Commission. In other countries, it is the Public Service Commission that essentially makes all senior appointments in government, and ministers do not have much of a role in those appointments. And I think one of the interesting other debates, which is probably going to be a hot debate, but is to think about something like a conditional amnesty, to say really that of the 2 parties involved in corruption, the one that comes forward first may qualify for amnesty. And it would also sow quite a lot of, we believe it would cause a lot of trust issues amongst those who were working together before. I think the work that the SIU has been building capacity is very, very important for the future. And I think there's about 600 people in the SIU at the moment. They've also have a partnership with the private sector where they get people in from the private sector at about half the normal Auditor General rates. So there's about 150 people working at the SIU at the moment, also from the private sector. And I think those sorts of things have really helped to build the capacity to investigate corruption. And I think while I'm on the point is, I think most people will probably agree that corruption, or at least that the perception is that corruption is significantly worse than it was 5 or 10 years ago. But I think what I can say when you talk about the question is, are we succeeding? I think what we are succeeding in doing is building a lot more capacity and investigating a lot more corruption than has been investigated in South Africa in the last 15, 20 years. I can't really talk authoritatively before under the previous dispensation. But I think the amount of people who are now full-time busy investigating corruption in South Africa has increased dramatically. And I think that is one of the reasons why, probably not the only reasons, but I think that is one of the reasons why we see a lot more about corruption in the newspapers. Because somebody has gone, they've done an investigation, they have the results of an investigation to announce. But to come back to those transparency perception indexes and so on, I think the fact that we read a lot more about corruption in the newspapers does affect perceptions about how bad corruption is. And I think the reason why the targets were set for us to say we have to get to convictions is I think people want to see those convictions, to see that government is really serious about fighting corruption. And I think that's where the challenge is for the ACTT in the next 2 years, is not just to bring well over 100 people to court, but to ensure that we get those convictions, because I think that ultimately is what will send the message that government is very, very serious. Section 34 of the Prevention of Corruption or Corrupt Activities Act says that it is a criminal offence for any public servant at an SMS level not to report a suspicion of corruption. There's a threshold where it involves more than 100,000 rand. But we have found in our work that this does not happen. And it is a high priority for the ACTT at the moment to identify some of these cases where it did not happen and to do criminal prosecutions of those for failing to report corruption. And we do think that will send a very strong message. Again, you probably should all know about this, but I'm not sure if you do, but Treasury or the Accountant General recently also wrote a letter to all accounting officers reminding them of this provision in the law and giving them the contact numbers and addresses and fax numbers where suspicions have to be reported, which is essentially preferably with the commercial branch of the Hawks. This is not an option. It's not that you may decide or not decide to report. There is a legal obligation on senior officials in government to report.